I feel like most people nowadays see climate change as a redundant topic. I mean, everybody's talking about it, right? Our teachers, our newspapers, our articles on the newspaper, and even movies nowadays talk about climate change. It's at a point where people don't want to hear about it anymore. And for me, that's also the case. I think it's a, let's just say, a redundant topic. I mean, everybody's talking about climate change at this point. So I feel like it gets a bit annoying and it gets a bit repetitive. For me, I think climate change should be talked about less because I'm just tired of someone sitting in a random podcast talking about climate change. I think like most people are also sick of it. But this movie definitely feels like a breath of fresh air. It feels that this movie has passion and compassion put into it at once, and this makes the movie special in this regard. Everybody thinks that climate change needs to be stopped being talked about. But once you watch this movie, you will think of climate change as an issue that should be brought up everywhere. That's why today we are covering climate change, averting catastrophe. This movie really holds a special place in my heart because of its amazing writing done by none other than Wolfgang Werner and also the executive producer Thomas Anders, who did a really amazing job in picking out different locations for this movie. Then we have the actors such as Danny Arnold, who have worked on bigger projects as well, come over here for a small project which is based on community work. I really like when big named actors work on smaller projects which are intended for the community. Danny Arnold is the character of a mountain climber who is trying to climb the mountain but cannot due to the extreme amount of climate change and snow which is happening on the mountain. I really like this. Most of the people who worked on this movie are either from Sweden or Germany, hence I really can't pronounce these names. My bad for that. Now let's cover a small synopsis of this whole movie. First, we got the mountain climber who's trying to climb the Alps but cannot due to the fact of climate change. And that's really the whole concept of this movie. Climate change, but covered in such a unique way that keeps the viewer hooked for a long period of time. Even though it was 1 hour long, I was completely hooked throughout this movie to the different plot points such as the Nordling project or different ideologies covered in this movie. They're not stating information here. They're building their own set of information to give to their viewers. It's truly a delight watching this movie. It's completely amazing in its entirety, and I really like what they have done. Let's move on to the synopsis. I really don't want to give off too many details, but let me show you a quick glimpse of something which I think is very cool. The Nordling project which is discussed in this movie.
Now to the source of the issue. Norway is famed for its abundance of lakes, fjords, rivers and streams, an almost inexhaustible supply of energy for society if you store the source in reservoirs, as the Norwegians do. Here at the Tonstad power plant in southern Norway, Gauta Tjorholm opens the gate to another world inside a rocky hillside. He'll be showing us how the country manages to produce more energy than it consumes, with the help of 1,600 hydroelectric facilities. The Tonstad facility alone generates enough energy to power the homes of a city of 1.5 million people. Its waters plunge to a depth of 440 meters.
Well, the maximum capacity here is 320 megawatt. It is 100 times a normal wind turbine. So quite big one of the biggest in Norway.
And where does all that surplus energy go? First, to this substation not far from the plant. and from there to Germany via a subsea cable that enables both countries to relay or receive clean green energy as circumstances demand.
When there is a lot of more energy than German use, they can send it to us, and we can stop our own machines and save our water for the future. When the wind is not blowing in Germany, we can produce and send it back. So in that way, we're working together to get the best out of it.
The direct power link between water-rich Norway and wind-swept Germany went online in May 2021. Nordlink runs between Tonstad, where the power lines have an audible buzz, to Wilster in northern Germany, where the 1,400 megawatts have more of a hum. In theory, this balance of production and demand would work inside Germany too, were it not for legal objections delaying the planned Südlink extension of the project down to the south of the country. As a result, stiff breezes in the north have led to wires overheating and turbines having to be temporarily shut down. A waste of energy.
That was a perfect example of where this movie shines. Interacting with the community and also interacting with big names such as Danny Arnold to make a project which seems very homespun but also very global and commercial in its scale. Did you see the cinematography as they moved through those mines? It truly looked something out of an action movie, which is what usually attracts to teenagers who don't want to learn about climate change. The Southern Alps are a big concern in this movie, where they are concerned about the perpetuating cycle of carbon emission. Basically, it states that when permafrost is melted, carbon is released, and that carbon also melts more permafrost, which in turn produces more carbon, and this keeps on causing problems for people living in different areas such as Switzerland, Germany, etc. Climate change really does not discriminate to any country, especially in India, due to the immense amount of pollution here. I think everyone can learn something from this movie. But now let me move on to some critiques and some good recommendations I have there for this movie in the next section. Now we are at the recommendation section. Would I recommend you watch this movie? That's a difficult question. I would say if you have the time, if you have the capacity to listen to someone talk for long periods of time, or you have the capacity to listen to someone who will sometimes state facts that you've already heard before, then I would suggest you can watch this movie. But if you don't really have the time of 1 hour to watch such a movie, you can easily look at the synopsis or different facts about this movie. I kept my review as spoiler free as possible, so you can enjoy this movie for yourself. If I would give it from a score of 10, I would feel like I will give it a 9. Reason being, that it's not the best documentary. It has its flaws. But whereas documentaries go, I think I like this one the most. You know, documentaries are really not my taste, but somehow I like this movie, and I think you will also like it too. That were my recommendations. Let's move on to the conclusion. Here we are at the end, at the conclusion, at the finale. Now, let's wrap up everything we have discussed. I've given my ideologies, I've given my pros and cons, I have given my synopsis, I've also given my recommendation for this movie. And ultimately, I think that this movie is actually pretty good, like I mentioned in my recommendation section. Of course, it depends from person to person what their experience is. Some things I would like you to do before you watch this movie is most likely look at some different facts about climate change, have a quick overview on what climate change actually is. I think you cannot just dive headfirst into this movie. But ultimately, the plot points with the Alps, the great acting from Danny Arnold, the amazing research work done behind the scenes, the cinematography, the great inclusion of community, and also the inclusion of different people of different races, religions, makes this movie a combination, basically a mixing pot of different aspects like great cinematography, video quality, etc. And it's all combined into one, into a big little surprise for the viewer. I would suggest you would watch this movie, like I said in my recommendation section, if you have the time. So these are my views. What are your reviews? You can tell me them personally. But I feel like you should go maybe and try to watch this movie if you have the time. Thank you and have a nice day. And this was Dilshan Sandhu on the review of the movie Climate Change, Averting Catastrophe.